Hey everybody, this is Saline County Hardliners back at you again. And tonight we got a bunch of comrades in arms in Arkansas first. We got my co-host Kevin Bradshaw. We got Clint Lancaster, Esquire. We got Jimmie the Pink Panther, Cavin, and Kandi Cox. I'm not gonna call you a name.
I feel left out. I feel left out here.
I went blank. But anyway, we've been in here is the legislation 95th the General Assembly has been in session for what 3 months now since in January, beginning of January, and they're done now. And so we got a bunch of experts here that have been, Kandi's had the podcast every Wednesday. Her and Jimmie's been on there, and here lately Clint's been on there. So they've all been hanging out at the Capitol for the last 3 months, pretty much every day, long days. So we're gonna try to hash this out a little bit on this show. And Kandi, I'm gonna go to you first.
Okay.
What's your take on this crazy General Assembly we had this year?
Well, of course, there were some good bills that passed through, but there were, to me, there were a lot of very disappointing bills. Those that were truly government overreach, those that really take aim at making things difficult with, I know we'll talk about the hammer bills. That's a big one to me. FOIA was a big deal this year as well. Overall, I feel like we saw a lot of purple at the Capitol. We saw a lot of purple. I actually did a podcast about that's going to be releasing tomorrow. About red or purple. What did we see? And another thing, I did have a couple guests that came on and spoke with me, but I had some people that turned me down because they just didn't want the questions. And I know that that's what it was. They did not want the questions from Arkansas first.
You got any bills in particular that stood out? And we'll go into them later, but
Yeah, we definitely have some bills that stood out. I know that we'll talk about the FOIA bill. Yeah. One of the bills that I was excited about was the raw milk bill, the baby Olivia bill. That's one. One that we teased about that we called the anti Clint Lancaster bill. There was a few.
There's only one.
I think we could have like a whole segment of Clint, anti-Clint Lancaster bills. But
any anti-Jimmie Cavin bills?
Well, they're probably going to write something up for dress code and anti.
Oh yeah.
That shirt for
Did you get fined? Did you get fined for that?
You can't get fined for a code that doesn't exist.
Yeah. Exactly. All right. Well, I tell you what, Jimmie, since you don't do the right dress code, you're next. What do you think about this ordeal?
This session was ultra disappointing in a lot of ways, and a couple of them is that the sheer attack on freedom, the calculated attack on freedom that was basically announced several months before the session. So many legislators literally said they were coming for the citizens' ability to initiate amendments and initiated acts, and they sure as hell did. And we lost. The bottom line is we lost freedoms. We lost a lot of freedoms in this session. The other thing that stands out is the overwhelming sheer lack of conservatism at the state capitol and the legislative body. Kandi calls it purple. I take it a step further and go, it's just the party of green, the swamp green. And I'm working on it now, an assessment of the legislators and such, kind of like a scorecard. And what I'm going to do in the coming days is I'm going to bring you my top 5 conservative picks in the House and the conservative picks in the Senate. And then I'm going to bring you my top cottonmouths in the House and in the Senate. The problem is I don't know that there is a top 5 conservative in the House and Senate, because I don't even know if we have 5 truly conservative.
And each one, you wouldn't have, even together.
And so I'm interested to get y'all's take too on the sheer lack of conservatism. To me, the majority party at the state capitol is the Swamp Party. And then next in line is actually the Democrats. The biggest minority at the state capitol, in my opinion, is conservatives. And and that's kind of my take on this session.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, Clint, what do you think about this stuff?
Well,
you didn't get in trouble for dressing wrong, did you?
No, I didn't, because I didn't go. I went up there only for Wednesdays. I mean, look, you kicked my wife out of the party for 20 years, and me and Kandi and you, Keith, out for 2, right? I can read that writing. And so I'm no longer a lobbyist.
Yeah, I'm a lifer on kicked out too. You know,
you are too, Jimmy. Geez, we're a band of misfits. I forgot. Yeah, you're too conservative for Faulkner County. There's a lot of takeaways out of this session. You might call it purple candy, and you might talk about the lack of conservatism, but I call it kitty barf, right? I mean, this is just like when your kid's cat throws up in the mudroom, right? It's like, who's going to clean this crap up? Because I'm not, And so there's a lot of takeaways. One takeaway that I did was it's really kind of telling is we saw the first real challenge to Governor Sanders' power as governor with the prison funding bills. I had an inside source let me just say it's one of the houses, right, House or Senate, who actually was very candid with me about how the governor was really, really whipping the body. And there were the quote was, man, there were tongue lashings and there were threats. But kudos to people like Gary Stubblefield, who's actually doing a good job representing his district, because he's the senator where that prison's going to go in. And he's like, no, we're not funding this. And then you had Josh Bryant try to run what I call a blank check bill in Senate Bill 633 that would just transfer the money over. And he got so much flack in joint budget that he just pulled the bill, right? And then you got Bart Hester saying, these bills aren't dead. They're just dormant. Hey, I'm here to tell you they're freaking dead, right? Because you know why? The session adjourned and nothing happened, right? And for the hardliners who watch this and who are curious about the steps going forward, there are really only 2, okay? She can have DOC make it a request for emergency appropriation from legislative council. I don't think they're going to do it because this ain't an emergency. But you have the fiscal session coming up, and one thing that Kandi and I talked about on Wednesday's show was that there's already some funding allocated, right? And with some funding allocated, that means they're going to start building. And there is nothing that Arkansans will like less than a half-built prison, right? So they're going to come back and they're going to finish this up. The Hammer bills, that all was a product of Joint Performance Review Committee is like an equivalent to like the U.S. House Oversight Committee. And it's kind of like a blank investigation force. And really, you heard it from Dan Sullivan in a committee meeting when he said, you say the people don't want this, but the people elected me, right? So the people want what I say they want. And I'm like, well, how in the hell did you get there, right? Hey, that's like me saying, oh, well, I want to be in Texas, so I'm making Little Rock, Texas, right? This is about as nonsensical, but that's their view. That's how their view is that the legislation is for them and not for you, peasant. And so direct democracy took some big hits. There's a lot of unconstitutionality around it all. For example, prior to the show, in the pre-show, we were talking about the 8th grade reading level bill, right? And so the U.S. Supreme Court has said that free speech is at its zenith when it comes to political speech. And so if you're telling me I got to talk to you like an eighth grader, right? It seems like I don't have free speech, but the legislature can't be bothered with that. No. And it doesn't, as Jimmie Cavin pointed out, as we refer to him as the hero Jimmie Cavin in our house, for his role in defending Kandi, who took my nose ring joke so good the other day. And so, yeah, you know, we talk, as he pointed out, you know, there's a big hit. There's a lot that's lost. And how will it get back? Well, somebody's going to have to sue somebody. You know, and I don't know that it'll be me, but and maybe it will if I get a new client. But my current client that's really pushed a lot of this litigation that I've done around paper ballots has got a newfound hope in President Trump and at the federal level. So, you know, this will be someone else's fight. And I just, you know, as I wrote for Arkansas First, when you limit one type of speech, you limit all types of speech. It's a double-edged sword that cuts both ways, and it cuts deep. So that's I got a lot of opinions, and if you don't like them, well, you probably better stop listening.
You know, Clint, you talked about how he goes, well, they voted for me. What the legislators are failing to remember is that the people voted for the American First agenda. And if you're not getting behind that, they'll vote you out because people are sick and tired of this mess.
No, I agree. They are. And Arkansas is a very conservative state. And it is a MAGA state, right? People love Trump. And they, you know, you've been writing, Jimmie, for Arkansas First and pointing out that I think you said you voted for Sarah Sanders and you got her, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I voted for her too. And I mean, in the primary, I voted for her opponent, Doc Washburn. But, you know, I can't have Chris, whatever his name is, being a governor. So, but, you know, Trump called her out on paper ballots and she says she's working on it. No, she ain't working. It's funny. She sent me a survey today. I got a text message asking me if I would do a survey and answer some questions for the governor about what's important to me. And I was like, well, this would be a waste of time because nothing I think is going to be important to you, right? You're not even going to pass this crap. And so it's just, you know, I think that Arkansas is going to wake up to this stuff. And I also will say this. Trump, in my opinion, has realized that he cannot rely on the states to further the agenda without help from the feds. And that's why you see legislation like the SAFE Act, which deals with voting for citizens in federal elections. You have some other legislation in the works, the Make Elections Secure Again Act. And so MESA. And when these come out, you have the executive order. People overlook that executive order from Trump saying that voting machines have to be recertified where no barcodes or QR codes can be used. That means that these wonderful machines that Kim Hammer loves and thinks are great aren't going to be able to be used in the election. And I'm going to tell you, I've reached out to Cole Jester or whatever his name is, the Secretary of State, and I want to know what your plan is. You know what I've heard? I've heard, as Robert Steinbuck would say, I heard cold crickets. Nothing.
Does he even know what to do? I mean, he don't probably know. He doesn't. They act like they don't get it. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. I was going to ask you about that. What they're going to do?
I don't know. They don't know what they're going to do.
There's a complete disconnect, and I think Clint's exactly right. And Kandi and I have had these conversations. There's a reality that our state is made up of a majority of conservatives, right? And so it's dumbfounding how we don't have a majority of conservatives at the state capitol. And it goes back to that wearing a conservative mask.
It's open primaries, Jimmie.
Do what?
Open primaries.
Yes, in which the conservative delegates in the state, you know, thought we had fixed that, right? Until the rug got pulled out. But I think it's so important, and this is one thing that I think Arkansas First News, where we're making a difference, okay, with Kandi's podcast, with Keith and Kevin's show, with what we write on Arkansas First News, is I had this conversation with Clint earlier that we see an uptick in surge in people paying attention to what their legislators are doing at the Capitol. And I can tell you, and I'd like to hear y'all's thoughts too, that I think that there's that through that uptick that people are seeing the thievery of freedom. If you remember, I wrote an article before the session even started. It said, "Hey, are the freedom thieves coming?" And they did. And I don't know who coined this phrase originally, but it couldn't be any truer. How do you lose freedom? A little bit at a time. And I think we saw that example with the attacks on the citizens' abilities to implement amendment and initiated acts. Little small chops here, a chop here, a chop there, that all of a sudden add up. But I'd like to hear what you guys think. Do y'all see an uptick the way I do in people actually paying attention to?
Yeah, I was gonna throw one out there. When I was knocking on doors, that I really found out a lot about how people thought. The reason why, and I've come to the conclusion, the reason why these establishment guys keep getting in there is, number one, they're not primaried that much. Number two is people are just now starting to distinguish. I'm talking about common people that don't really pay a lot of attention to politics, but just watch the news every night, have not distinguished between Republicans and conservatives. They kind of think automatically, well, they're Republican, so they're conservative. They haven't caught on to what we've caught on already, and which Arkansas First News helps put out, is that just because you're Republican doesn't mean you're conservative. And I think, like they would say something and they go, well, they're Republican too. So yeah, I might vote for them. But you need to look at what kind of Republican they are, because and I think that's just really catching hold. It's hard for us to believe because we've been watching a long time. You got some people that don't pay that much attention, and they just think, oh, Republican, yeah, man, he's going to be good, and they turn their head on the rest.
Well, the proof's in the pudding like this. I'm sorry about that. But what I'm trying to say is, just based on the views we're getting nowadays and the views that you guys are getting and the views that Arkansas First is getting, people are waking up and they're wanting information about what's going on in their local government, especially since what's going on with Doge and everything at the national level. People are starting to wake up and want to see what's going on.
People like us who are true conservatives and idealists are quick to forget that the majority of politicians view their role as a career, right? Let's just take Tim Griffin, right? He's been lieutenant governor, he's been congressman, he's been in
he's on the carousel.
Oh yeah, he is. And he's already, jockeying for the governor's role and cutting Leslie Rutledge's throat every chance he gets.
Oh, that's a good fight.
Yeah, we forget that. We forget that the establishment, it's in the business of staying in power. And that's why Kandi pointed it out. Closed primaries. We'll never, ever have true conservatives in office because people who are Democrats who know that Republicans are going to get elected, they're happy to vote for the more moderate conservative, moderate Republican, as opposed to, say, the true one. And I go back to the Clint Penzo, Steve Womack race. If you had closed primaries, Steve Womack would not be in Congress right now. Clint Penzo would.
That's true. That's a true statement.
And you also have to take into consideration the amount of money you have to run. To file to run.
30 grand.
Well, look at how quick Sarah Sanders came in to help fund Steve Womack's campaign, right? Yeah, I mean, the snakes. Have you ever seen this movie or this show, Lonesome Dove? It's an American classic, but there's a scene where they're trying to cross like the Brazos River, and this cowboy gets bit by this herd of like cottonmouths that are all tangled up together in the flood. That's what I really think of when I think about how this system functions. And we're not letting the average person fix it. We don't need your help over there, little peasant. You do what we tell you.
Right.
Yeah, I think people are starting to see that. I mean, well, they've always seen it, but they think their own party doesn't do it. But both parties,
I think something else we see is, and we saw it this year, and I'm not going to call names out right now because I'm busy really dissecting this. But we saw it the last session, we saw it this session, is when you do get freshman legislators in there. Okay, we've seen this whether it's at school board level, city council, quorum court level, whatever. We've seen people that they run for the right reason. And when I get in there, I'm going to do this, and I'm not going to play those political games. And it's like as soon as they get in there, though, it's like it's an immediate indoctrination. And you see those freshman legislators and then those sophomore legislators struggle. And we saw it this year on some folks that were elected in the last session, where we had expectations of what they were going to do when they got there. And then it's like they got there and they get them in the back room with the indoctrination. And then boom, all of a sudden, they're not even doing anything close to what your expectations were, right?
Right, right.
And so that's something we have to combat. And the question is, how do we combat that? When you vet a candidate, a new candidate, so even if we have primaries, even if we have open primaries, which we all want, okay, and
we want closed.
Closed.
Right, closed primaries, but I mean closed primaries, in which we all want, right? And so maybe God will be with us and we'll win that lawsuit. But even if we get that, I think we also have to come to the realization, what do we do when we find that candidate that we feel like is going to get in there and hold that conservative line? And when they get there, the indoctrination comes in. Mm-hmm. And so, am I making sense with that?
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah,
absolutely. Because you get, well, you have to play the game to get some wins on your side and to get a few things to go through. But you were sent there because your constituents had faith that you were going to stand on the principles that you ran on.
It's kind of like people.
I'm sorry, and I know Clint can allude to this as well. But you take a guy like Brian King, Senator Brian King. Okay, he won't budge.
Yeah,
he won't budge on his conservatism, right? And
Penso doesn't budge.
And we're going to talk about him as well. And that's where I'm going with this.
That's about it.
Brian King has been blackballed. There's no way in hell he's going to get anything passed. And now we're seeing that. Apply to Clint Penso. He's starting to get ostracized. And I know, Clint, you've noticed that, have you not?
Oh yeah, well, you see that there's a click. I mean,
Wayne Long too.
Wayne Long. I mean, he fell to that click as well. Yeah. I was disappointed in a lot of the people, but here's the thing: what kind of tempers my disappointment is I change my expectations. Right? I don't expect them to do the right thing, and that helps. It's kind of like making my kids watch Razorback football at a young age so they learn the meaning of disappointment early, right? And so the same thing with these senators. But I agree. Penso is getting ostracized. Brian King can't pass a dog catcher bill. Can't get funding for a dog catcher. And I mean that's sad. And what's really sad about it is it comes from the highest level of the executive branch. And it comes from the Senate leadership. Like, I was watching the floor session of the Senate one day this past session, and Bart Hester's running some bill, and Clint Penso asked him a question: would this have any impact on the Buffalo River? And like Bart Hester's like, I appreciate that very hostile question from you, Senator Penso. And I texted Clint. I was like, hey, if you get arrested for slashing his tires, I will represent you for free. And so, but that's just kind of what the view is. It was a legitimate question, and Clint was genuinely shocked at Hester's response.
So they take defense upon him, automatically.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, it's like a kindergarten playground. You know, our government officials, our elected officials can't act appropriately.
Yeah, and some freshmen just can't, you know, I think they mean well, and they certainly mean to go up there to do well, but they just can't take that being the guy that votes 1 against 99. They just can't take that. They can't take that negativity that they're going to get. They just, you know, they want to go into the threats and all that because they'll get threatened. They do get threatened. You know, the threat, you know, if you don't help me here, I'll never help you, you know, or some crap like that.
Kandi and I have had discussions where she's had those discussions with legislators in the hallways at the Capitol and behind the scenes that you know, off the record, I believe they have spoken to Kandi about the immense pressure they feel. Is it? And Kandi can probably fill us in on that. It's a lot of pressure, isn't it?
Yes, it is pressure, and they feel like they have to give or they don't want to give to be able to work in the inner workings to get something for themselves. And, you know, that's unfortunate because, you know, my view when I'm in my encouragement to them is just do the right thing. Let the dice fall where they may, and you just do the right thing. Do what you were sent there to do. And again, if you get primaried and you get voted out, so be it. But your conscience can be clean when you do the right thing.
Also, when they're you know, threatening your not to support you and all that, you know, you still got to stand your ground. You know, like there is a protest vote. I hear them say, "Well, I've asked some questions about why you voted this way." Well, it wasn't going to pass anyway, or something, you know. So you know, I didn't, you know, basically, I don't want to be the one of the few that doesn't vote for it. You know, there is a thing called a protest vote. I mean, whether it's going to pass or not, not the point. You're showing that you're supporting it when you vote for it. That doesn't mean you don't, you know, just because you know it's not, you're going to make friends, you know.
I'm glad that you brought that up, Keith, because one of the things that butters my hot biscuit more than anything is for someone to vote present.
Yeah.
What do you guys feel about that? Like it just irritates me to
They either don't want to stick their neck out or they don't understand it, but they should understand it. But usually it's probably because they don't want to stick their neck out.
Yeah.
When somebody votes present, I want to look them in the eye and say, grow a set.
Exactly.
Grow a set. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, I mean, that is just the ultimate wuss move to vote present.
Cheap. It's pretty cheap. Yeah, pretty cheap.
Did you got everybody here votes, right? Did any of you vote for somebody to go there to vote present?
No.
I sure as hell didn't.
Right. Just do your job. Do the job that you were sent there to do. And to me, a present vote is it's to me
wishy-washy. It is. I mean,
it's constituents.
It's definitely a purple vote.
We're paying your salary and all that to go up there and do this stuff, and you can at least say yes or no. That's it.
Well, I mean, here's the deal, and I know y'all agree with me on this. Look, if you're gonna vote a way that I don't approve of, look me in the eye and make that vote. And state your case and state your case and stand your ground. That is one thing that liberal Democrats do better. And I don't want to say do better than conservatives because we already established we really don't have any conservatives in state capitol. But one thing they do better than these establishment Republicans is very seldom do you see them vote present. And they'll stand on what they do. But when I see people like Senator Flippo or Alan Clark or these people like this vote president, I mean, it just, come on.
At least don't show up.
Well, you know, a present vote is a no vote.
Exactly.
Right? It's not a yes vote. It's a no vote, but it's a, you know, it's a less than honorable way of doing it. The same thing with not voting, right? I'm not voting on this.
Chicken shit.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, look, vote. Don't vote present. It's
or
a
at least
yes or no question.
make a doctor's appointment and don't come or something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
what do you guys think about, you know what we saw this session too? We saw a lot of that somebody will vote yay or nay in committee, and then they'll get to the floor and vote present. And you go, what? Wait a minute, because committee votes aren't recorded unless there's a call for a roll call, right? And so how many votes do you see in committee that they'll vote one way and then they get, and we saw Rice do it on the collateral source bill, right? The one that put money in big insurance, out-of-state insurance companies' pockets. Okay, in committee, he voted to put that bill on the floor. But in the floor, because the votes had been whipped to where they knew they were going to have enough, it allowed him to vote no. I'll remember Mark Pryor years ago on Obamacare and everything. Same deal. He was one of those to get it out of committee, but when it got to the floor, they had whipped enough votes where he could vote no. Well, I want people to know Senator Terry Rice did the same thing in that committee on that disastrous bill that Clint can expand on, that just literally put money in out-of-state insurance companies' pockets and did nothing for the average Arkansan. He did that, and that's what really makes me mad. You voted to get it to the floor, and then you get the floor, so you whip the votes to know there's enough, so you can say, wait a minute, I voted no. The hell you did. Right?
I tell you what made me mad was on that library bill, 536, I believe it was, SB 536. It was Sullivan and Long, and I was for that. I spoke for that. That's the one I spoke for. Well, they pushed it back to where it was after lunch and after the session. So I spoke late, but when you do that, there was about it was a close vote. And if the ones had shown up that were on the committee that would have voted for it, it would have passed. That pisses me off when they don't show up and their vote is that important where it's not even going to get out of committee because you didn't bother to come back because it's late.
Right.
That's bull. That tears me up.
Tells how you really
They
feel.
are getting paid, they are getting paid. It's not like it's volunteer.
I'll ask you this. This is what I get sick of hearing. You know what? I want to look at them and say, you want some cheese with that wine. Okay. Around my house, we don't wine. Okay. We got to think about not wine. And legislators tend to whine. And so I'm asking Clint, you work hard every day, right? At the end of the day, you work hard, put in a lot of hours. There are days you put in 14, 15 hours. Do you get tired?
Of course.
Okay. Kandi, with what you do, there are days you put in 20 hours, right? Do you get tired?
I stay tired.
And so you know what? Join the rest of the world, legislators. Hell, we're all tired.
You took the job, and you took the job knowing what it entails.
Oh, that aggravates the hell out of me when they say, well, it just needs to hurry up and get up. It's your job. It's your job. If you don't like it, don't run.
And but I've seen so many legislators in committees on late nights or tired. They say, look, we want to limit public comment because we want to get out of here tonight. We want. Okay, well you're whining. And I'm not picking on Cindy Crawford. Well, I guess I am. But I heard her literally whine like a newborn child in a committee meeting one night and tell the chairman, Mr. Chairman, I'm tired. I'm ready to go home. Well, shit. I am too, but I'm still there.
I wonder why they, they do work, go a lot of hours near the end, because they cram it all in. But if they would get rid of some of that bull crap bills they have that mean nothing and they're repeats and all that, they'd probably have only half the bills they have.
Two of my favorites on that subject, they debated for about an hour on whether the state would sanction wrestling events. Right? This is my tax dollars at work. And then there was another one that I even wrote an article about. It was like, I think I called it "What the Duck," because somebody wanted to make the mallard the official duck of the state of Arkansas. And it was like a debate about whether it's a duck a bird. And according to a guy named R.J. Hawk, a duck is not a bird. Now, maybe we should believe that because his last name is Hawk and he seems authoritative, right? But I'm like, this is what
I think he's
this
wrong.
is the highest
I think
order
he's
of
wrong.
government.
I think he's wrong.
Yeah,
So,
I think he is too.
to Clint's point, though, I mean, the absurdity, right?
Yeah.
The absurdity of bringing those, and I'm not picking on Brian King, but in 2023, he brought a bill that said a private school, if they private schools play against public schools for state championships, right? Okay. And he brought a bill in 2023 that said, well, if a private school wins the state championship game, they shouldn't get the trophy because they have better resources and everything. I'm going, why in the hell is this in here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Why is this in here? I mean, so yeah, boy, you just, in what's so bad is people, and that's one thing I want to say again, is Arkansas First News is doing such a great job. Saline, Hardliner is doing a great job. Kandi's doing a great job of bringing what actually happens at the Capitol to the public, to show you what we're talking about, because people don't know that stuff happens.
I know.
Well, and
Kandi
I'm
and
happy.
Clint, y'all are wore out. All three of y'all are wore out doing the
Well,
show.
yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah, you guys are worn out
what
doing
makes
all
me
this.
unhappy is that my taxpayer dollars are funding an act to make the Labrador the official dog of Arkansas. Look, dog, I ain't interested. Okay, that dog don't hunt.
And I love that the dog don't hunt.
But they do have a lot of just. I'm reading some. I thought, who cares? You know, I mean, what the hell?
So Jennifer says that if they would cut out all that crap at the beginning about congratulating football teams and people for the Alpha Psi whatever fraternity, I don't care. Get to work on stuff that matters.
Have them come in and give them awards. That's fine.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Well, and I call it clutter, but it's cluttered by design.
Well, they want that extra time and that extra money. They want to go longer so they get that extension money.
It's cluttered by design to run cover for what they're actually trying to get done that they don't want you to see a lot of times. And that's why I'll use, I really want y'all's opinion on this. I'll use Senator Dan Sullivan, okay? And, he runs the DEI bill. Okay, great. It's conservative. Everybody's going, yay, Dan, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. But he's running a DEI bill that got passed, which is great, but absolutely has no teeth in it. No teeth whatsoever.
He doesn't like to put teeth.
And so if you think the city of Fort Smith and the city of Little Rock and the city of Pine Bluff and the city of Fayetteville are going to follow a bill that went into law that's actually a suggestion, you're wrong. But what did it do? It threw a little red meat to the conservative base. And so while you're chewing on that red meat, they're over here with Ken Hammer's bills taking your freedoms. So while you're watching this, and they threw you just a little red meat to appease you, they're busy over here taking your freedoms away. Am I making sense with that?
Oh, yeah.
Right. Watch here. As Randy says, watch here, not over here.
Yeah. And I was also disappointed. I noticed when I was when you're in these committee meetings watching, you guys all done it a lot more than me. You notice how little a lot of them know about even what they're voting. Some of them are voting on things they haven't even looked at. I mean, it's obvious because the questions they ask, and just now, it's just amazing. I thought, well, some of them are just voting. They don't even know what it is. I mean, and that's in Congress. That's in the federal Congress too, of course. But I noticed it when I was, if you watch those committee meetings, that's where it really shows up that some of them have no clue what they're voting on.
You said something, Keith, that really segues into something that we've all talked about. And I can't remember if it's SB 209 or 210, but it's one of the bills Hammer read that said before they deemed that before you and I can sign a petition for to support an amendment or initiated act, that we have to, in front of the petitioner, read the ballot type.
Or have them read it to us because we're so incompetent.
And so, and to your point on this, them not reading it. So when I testified in committee,
and that's
I put it back at them. I said, look, okay, if you're going to mandate that I have to read that before I sign it, then at least have the courage to one of you run a bill that says, before you can vote on a bill on the Senate floor or House floor, you have to stand in front of the secretary and read that entire bill before she'll record your vote.
I
didn't want that.
They would cry. Oh, they would just be so fit.
So my favorite example of this was actually in the DEI bill that went through committee, because David Ray, who bless his heart, we should pray for him. But he asked the sponsor, was it which Supreme Court overturned affirmative action? I'm like, dude, do you live under a rock? Like, do you have a smartphone? Like, what is affecting you? I mean, that was the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And again, we're ending affirmative action in Arkansas. Well, guess what? That's really kind of pointless because the feds have already done it.
Yeah. But hey, they got you looking here, right?
They do.
I'm looking and laughing. I make the comparison to a shell game, and a lot of the younger folks don't understand that. But if you're as old as I am, or Keith, you understand it. Especially at the county fairs, I was raised on 8 miles down a dirt road in Oklahoma County. So you go to county fair, you got all kind of games going on behind the games. And one of the gambling games is a shell game, where they'll take literally a nutshell and put a pea under it and have 3 of them, and they'll start sliding them around and saying, okay, where's the pea at? You say it's under that shell, and they lift it and it's not there. Well, that's literally what they do at the state capitol, isn't it? They move those shells so fast. And so I read about it, and I said, look, it's kind of one of those deals that I don't claim to be a smart guy. I admit I can't keep up with the shells. Okay. And it's one of those deals where I know I'm getting screwed. I don't quite know how I am, but I know I'm getting screwed. And
yeah. Well, it's good for you. It's good for you, peasant.
Well, I gotta tell you something. I'm really not enjoying getting screwed. Okay.
Especially all these years. I mean, this ain't the first year either.
And I'll submit, like the ivermectin bill, which Kandi loves. Okay, we all love it, right? But still, and I'm glad it got introduced. So you have Alan Clark introduce that, okay, and it passes, and I'm glad it did, and we're all glad it did. But here we go with here's a bone.
Yeah.
Here's a bone. Okay, simple deal. And while you're doing that bone, then Alan Clark's over here running anti-transparent legislation, or he's fully supporting everything that Kim Hammer and David Ray are doing to take your freedoms away. And so while we appreciate those little crumbs, we want more than that, do we not?
Right.
Yeah, I think we all do. I think that what we would like is to see legislatures that enable freedoms rather than take it away. And it's all about consolidating the power, like for this joint, this attempt to get an economic development commission on the ballot, which failed, right? What that was that would give the legislature the discretion and authority to create economic districts where they would take tax dollars to fund economic growth in their discretion, right? Yes. And I mean, that's like, well, just keep giving yourself all the power. I mean, I think of was it Jafar in the Aladdin movie where he gets the genie and he keeps giving himself all the powers that he wants. He's the greatest sorcerer that ever lived, whatever. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what the legislature does. They're all like, well, let's see how much power we can give ourselves.
Well, the secretary, they got more power through this legislative session.
But yeah, and he's running for it. Isn't that something?
Yeah. I like the part where he was going to create his own police force for himself. Like, as I've
yeah,
said, that's what I want to be.
That was just the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Well, when I was a kid, I grew up thinking, when I grow up, I want to be a document authenticity investigator for the Secretary of State. Ooh.
Well, and the funny thing about that, we were able to stop that one in the Senate committee, right? We killed it in committee, and we were in. But the big kicker out of that is they're telling you, Senator Hammer is telling you, and they've got the Secretary of State, Nathan Lee, the attorney at the Secretary of State's office, who I like. He's a nice young man, and he's got a client, and that client ain't me or you. And so they're trying to make the argument that when they create this police force at the Secretary of State, that it's going to be budget neutral, that it won't increase any costs. Yeah. Because the senator. Now, come on, guys. And so I brought up, I said, look,
it'd be a whole agency. It'd be a whole agency.
I basically said, have you guys ever heard of CLEST?
Yep.
I mean, because they had something to say about this. And they're trying to say, well, we're going to be, but we're really not going to be police officers. Well, no, that's not how that works.
That's why they're going to send them to law enforcement school, I guess.
And well, they were saying they weren't but you're going to how do you grant law enforcement powers without following the rule? I mean, you have to have a police chief. That's part of the law. And I asked him, I said, have you even read the laws on how to do this? And Clint called it best when he said what it was going to be is a Gestapo.
Yeah.
Which was exactly what it was going to be.
Yeah.
But when
Brown
you
shirt.
tell people that we're going to create a whole new division that they already said they were getting like several hundred complaints every time on this. So you're going to create a whole new division that's going to have to handle all these complaints. So that means an incident report for each one of them. Clint knows what I'm talking about. I mean, you got to do an incident report.
Yeah, the KHP.
Yeah. And then you're telling me that that's not gonna add to any cost to the Secretary of State's office budget?
Well, and on top of that, what is a fraudulent document, right? I have this argument going from the Arkansas Supreme Court right now, because in Cleveland County, the county attorney is arguing that the affidavits were fraudulent. I'm like, okay, well, what's fraudulent? You can't just say they're fraudulent, right? Mm-hmm. You know, or he says, well, they marked through and wrote a different address, so therefore they're fraudulent. I said, well, what part is fraudulent? Is this not their domicile? Is this not their residence? I mean, just because it's got a mark on it doesn't make it fraudulent. And what's really funny is, Joint Performance Review Committee referred a lot of the people who worked on those paper ballot measures to the Arkansas Attorney General's Election Integrity Division. All right, well, first off, this isn't even covered by the division. They can only investigate elections and fraud in elections. And this wasn't an election. It was a petition gathering. But what's funny is I happen to represent all those people too. So the first time the Attorney General's office called one of them, I called the investigator and be like, hey, he doesn't want to talk to you. I'm his lawyer. And right, so this investigation has gone nowhere. And it's stupid. And they've tried to fix it with the Kim Hammer bills. And I mean, I think Jimmie, you've heard me say many times, we're not nearly as free as we think we are.
That's
right.
Yes.
Right.
True statement. And here's the deal. In Kandi and I had this conversation. Here's what got teed up. Senator Hammer and the Cottonmouths who voted for all this to put this in law. Clint had this question. Okay, well, what's fraud? Well, Kandi, didn't we just tee it up to say, well, Ken Hammer gets to decide what fraud is?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And we have no recourse to dispute that, right?
That's right.
And so when we had this discussion, I brought it up, preponderance of evidence, and Clint can back me up on this. Preponderance of evidence, that's what they're going to use. That's what the Secretary of State is going to use to determine if something is fraudulent or if a rule wouldn't follow. Well, that to the average person, that sounds like, oh, well, that's a lot of evidence. No, it's not. It means, in your opinion, that it's more than 50% likely, in your opinion, that it's fraudulent. So it's even Nathan Lee, the Secretary of State's attorney, said it in the committee, 50% plus a feather. And so, but it literally says that the Secretary of State can say, in my opinion, it's more than 50% likely that this is fraud. Okay, well, Clint can give us the backstory on this, but in a civil, that's what's used in civil court, not criminal court. But in a civil court, if I get sued and they're saying, okay, it's 50% likely, Jimmie, well, then I get a chance to defend myself, right?
You do, yeah. And you didn't get that out of that bill. It would have been more refreshing for them to say, if in the opinion of the Secretary of State, he doesn't like it, right? Then he can ixnay it. Yeah. And again, it's a bill. What these people don't understand is you got to read case law. Okay, when the U.S. Supreme Court interprets the Constitution or a statute, its interpretation becomes a part of the Constitution itself. Kind of like that old Pirates of the Caribbean thing where he's part of the ship. He's been here so long, right? Mm-hmm. That's the Supreme Court's opinion. The Supreme Court has said that it is their job and their job only to determine what makes a proper ballot title. And you go back to this 8th grade reading level. The one I did for Independence County that the Supreme Court has already said is legally appropriate and perfectly fine. It's at like an 80th grade reading level. So how is it that
8th graders can't vote? So that's what I say.
Well, I mean, but how is it the Supreme Court, the ultimate authority, says that the language that I've already used is sufficient, but now legislature, you're going to say it's not?
I've got a question. And I only saw this floating around on Facebook, but I wanted to know, Jimmie, especially since you were in a lot of the committee meetings, if you heard this like I did, but I just saw it on Facebook that it was going around. But on April the 9th, that the switchboard said that they were not taking any more pink slips, that Mr. Webb has said to not fill any more out. That has to do with the prison, the SB 354.
I saw that myself. Now I'm pretty skeptical that that's actually what happened.
Okay.
I would be shocked if it was.
Right.
But that's one of those things that probably got started as a rumor and spread, and that. You know me, I'm a facts not fiction guy, and if I even thought that was a possibility, I would be digging into it. But no, I don't believe that happened at all.
Right, and I saw that going around social media quite a bit, and I was like, well, that, like you, that's really hard to believe. But I knew that you were attending a lot of those, so I wanted to have heard any of that.
Nobody came to me with that. Okay, nobody at the Capitol came to me with that. Nobody, and I can tell you this: there are a lot of staff members at that state capitol, whether whatever department they're in at that state capitol. There are so many staff members in that somebody would have came to me and said, "Hey, Jimmie, let me tell you what's going on here." And I didn't get anything on that. And now I can tell you this. Let's be clear about this. The level of dishonesty at that state capitol is unmatched. I mean, there is so much dishonesty and unethical behavior at that capitol, at the swamp politics. But I think that the staff does a good job of not engaging in that and won't engage in that, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I got a bitch about one bill before we go that I forgot about that really, really ticked me off, and that's that Shannon's bill. And I can't remember the number on it, on the truck, the illegal immigrant truckers, that they didn't, that just died out. That really pissed me off. And that really shows a lot of the color of the legislature, because here you are trying to stop illegal immigration. Trump's trying to, stop it, get them out of here, and we're pulling this kind of crap. And I kept hearing, well, it was not gonna. It becomes against the federal government and it won't stick and all. So what? Do it I mean, they're eventually going to change it now because Shannon's getting national coverage now. I mean, I don't know if y'all saw him on War Room. He was on War Room and with Bannon and got him all fired up about it. And I just don't. I was really disappointed about that.
What you had there?
House Bill 1569.
Yeah, I was really on charge on that.
What you had there is, and we've seen this before. You had competing bills, right? You have the bill that R.J. Hawk was running, and then you had this bill that Shannon that Wayne Long, if I remember correctly, Wayne Long was sponsoring. Right. And they were actually somewhat competing bills. And what does kind of get you those, because we've seen competing bills before, right? But they're both run. They're both given their just due. And what I took away from that, and I admittedly, I didn't dig into both those bills that much because I knew Kandi was talking about it, Clint was talking about it, and so many people were talking about it. So, okay, I just didn't dig into them. But where I'm going with that is, when you have those competing bills, at least give them both the fair shot. Am I making sense on that?
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Did y'all, in my mind, I don't think that fair shot happened, did it?
No, RJ's was not gonna. That wasn't doing anything to me. I mean, Clint, what do you think about those bills?
I think that in a lot of cases, what you see is the legislatures are not willing to make decisions on tough issues, right? We're happy to go remove affirmative action out of the state of Arkansas, especially since, we weren't happy in the last session because the Supreme Court hadn't ruled. But now that the Supreme Court has said it's okay, here we come, right? Yeah. We're ready to come. But look at how wonderful I am. Well, it's I was listening to Matt Walsh talk about this woman who went to space and is mad because people don't call her an astronaut. If you don't call her an astronaut, you're sexist, right? And Walsh had a good point. He said that's like making a phone call and expecting someone to praise you like you're Alexander Graham Bell. Like, it was much more difficult when Alexander Graham Bell made the telephone to make a phone call. The fact that you do it now means very little. So we don't see those legislatures take tough positions. Rarely will we see them take tough positions when it could be unfavorable to them somehow. And they'll wait. That is the plan. They will wait until someone else does it for them.
Be like doing a bombing raid on Hiroshima after the atomic bomb hit.
Yeah.
Well, I will tell you, when it came to Shannon's bill, it really gained national attention. As you,
it's still gaining national attention. Yeah.
Yes, it is, and you could not go on TikTok without seeing, with the algorithm of TikTok. If you watch something, it continues to bring more of that same thing to your page. I was getting video after video after video of these truckers all over the United States that were talking about this bill. And, many of them had thought that it passed. They were talking about it as if it had passed. And they were excited about this bill. But yeah, it has gained national.
It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. I mean, if you're against illegals taking everything we got, it's a no-brainer. I mean,
Yeah, when we talk about national attention, which is great, but I'll give you an example. What does national attention make a difference at the Capitol? Very little.
Right.
And let's take paper ballots, for example. Okay. Governor Sanders is up at CPAC, and I believe it was CPAC. Clint, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And she's getting interviewed, and she gets that question because Trump is pushing for paper ballots. The national deal is paper ballots, right? And so she gets that question, and all of a sudden she gets national attention, right, on Arkansas on paper ballots. And she goes, "Oh, well, we're working on that." Well, the hell you are. And when you came back, you didn't work on it. And so my point on that is, while national attention is so good, we talked about this before. You hear me say it all the time. While Trump is working to drain the swamp in Washington, Governor Sanders and the Cottonmouths are working to expand it in our state.
I'm just hope that, the thing about national is that it can be handled at the federal level, because the feds have created the problem in the first place. So,
I think to your point,
it doesn't matter about it, but it would be nice though if we could get on board, show that we're on board with something. I mean, I think it's going to eventually happen federally with Trump. I mean, if it starts getting the word out.
I think to your point that it's that federally, it's going to have to be taken care of federally instead of state by state, and that applies to a lot of things. But I still go back to national attention is so good, but does it affect anything at the Capitol with Governor Sanders and anybody there? And the answer is, why it's good. The answer is, the reality is, no, it doesn't.
No,
it doesn't affect it. And where the attention, that's the reason we talk about Arkansas First, is we're focused on what we can do here in getting it done here. And while national attention is great, we've got to have the attention of the people in Arkansas to go to their legislators and say, look, here's what we want. Here's what we want. And it goes back to Kandi's whole point of closed primaries. How do we effectively do it? Okay, one way is closed primaries. But you've got to put that pressure on. You've got to put that pressure on. And those legislators, and because they could care less what somebody's saying nationally about them, it doesn't change what they're going to do until somebody. I'll give you. I've used this example before. Okay, people in Tennessee, can feel a certain way about something in Arkansas, but they don't vote here.
Right. And
so the voters have to get engaged. You can have a national audience today, but until the voters of the state get engaged, and that's where hopefully we come in.
Right. And I think that Arkansas First is doing a great job at educating, the voters, and also putting the call out to help them get engaged, to let them know how important it is to be engaged and to let their voice be heard. My last podcast that released last week with Arkansas First Reports, I had on Mike Rasmussen and Aaron Hansen, really talking about, from Mike's perspective, living here and this being really his first year engaging at the Capitol and in politics, and what he saw and why he finally got engaged with that. And then from Aaron's perspective, moving from Washington State, a very liberal state, to Arkansas, what brought him here. And I know that you guys talked about it here on the Hardliners as well. And he moved to Arkansas because he saw 3 branches of government that were all red, and he gets here and he's been here a couple of years and he's seeing it ain't as red as it looks on the map.
He goes, I like the people, but your government is purple.
Yes.
I mean, the people are red. The government's purple.
Yeah.
Hey, can I ask Clint a question? I know I'm jumping in there. I'm supposed to be here answering questions, not asking. But to kind of this point of everything, the attacks on direct democracy, and we've talked about, what the courts have already ruled in certain deals and things like that. Clint, you were real famous for saying that a lot of these actions that got taken are actually lawsuits looking for a courtroom.
Yeah, they are.
So tell us, if you don't mind, tell us what that looks like going forward. The legislators they've done what they were going to do. They didn't care what anybody thought. So to fix this, what does this look like going forward? What has to happen for somebody to file that initial lawsuit to get this ball rolling?
Well, so, I mean, really what you need is a ballot question committee that's trying to run an issue, right? Because if you think back to the last session, not this one that just wrapped, they increased the county level from 15 to 50. And Brian King jumped in a lawsuit with, of all people, the League of Women Voters, this cesspool of liberals. And I'm like, I'm not representing him. There is no way. But that lawyer has not done a good job of getting ruling.
David Couch.
Yeah, I mean,
David Couch.
He's not, and I mean,
yeah.
And part of that, you could have gone into that with more focus, because it's clearly unconstitutional. But somebody's going to have to bring a lawsuit, right? They're going to have to bring a lawsuit on challenging this stuff, and ultimately, it is going to the Arkansas Supreme Court. That is ultimately where it's going. And that court right now is very much made up of a majority of textualists who just believe the text means what it literally says. Mm-hmm. And I think that if it gets in their hands, they will undo a lot of this stuff, because the Constitution's our supreme document. You can't, and on top of that, you could probably bring a federal lawsuit on a free speech claim by saying, hey, telling me that I have to read something to somebody. The problem is if a talking snake at the Piggly Wiggly tells you that this is an amendment about women's health and you're not smart enough to read it, but still, that's her political speech. She's free to say what she thinks it's about, and you can't limit that. And so the feds would hack that off in a heartbeat, along with, the federal court system has said that even having prohibiting paid canvassers and like making it to where they can't be paid by the signature, that all is an unconstitutional regulation on free speech. But our lawyers aren't bright enough to bring the lawsuits in the right places. They just take it to the Arkansas Supreme Court without even looking that the U.S. Supreme Court has already said that that's unconstitutional. Mm-hmm. How do you think the U.S. District Court in Little Rock is going to rule when you walk in with a precedent from SCOTUS? They're going to rule with SCOTUS.
Yeah. And I think so much of this, and you said it so much, these are lawsuits looking for a courtroom. But what I get in Kandi and I have had these conversations about how brazen that is. They literally know that this is all going to go to court. And I made the point the other night, when thankfully it didn't get through the House to get it, but the bill Mark Johnson and David Ray brought to limit the ballot titles to 500 words and to get that. And if you'll remember, I wrote the article on it when Dotson got that opinion from the AG back last early September or so that teed all this up, right? But they literally admitted that in that committee, which passed it to get it to the floor, that this was going to create a test case. What they were doing was creating a test case. And so they admitted that their purpose of running this legislation is to get it to the Supreme Court. But when I hit back with, I said, well, here's the deal, though. Okay, you're teeing this up to go to court. You admit that, okay? But here's the thing: the plaintiff has to go hire an attorney to file this lawsuit, and the plaintiff has to pay the attorneys. Okay, to add insult to injury, I got to pay that same plaintiff. Me, you as citizens, we have to pay for your legal defense, Mark Johnson. We have to pay for your legal defense, David Ray. So you have no skin in the game on this. And that's the part that really fires my butt up, because it's monopoly money to them, right?
Yeah.
And Kandi and I have had these conversations before. And so, Kandi, it's no skin off Mark Johnson or David Ray's butt, right?
No, it's not. I mean, they pass their bills, they do what they want, and they go on with life, and they let the system work itself out.
I think we can all agree it is a nasty, nasty business.
Oh.
But we've got out of time. Hey, Kevin, you got something you want to?
Oh yeah. So since we're running out of time here, I'm going to go ahead and promote all of our normal promotions. So thank you guys all for watching. We got over 15 viewers. We got 16 viewers now and over 300 views already. And I really appreciate everyone watching. I've been talking with you guys in the chat this whole time, and y'all have been really, really focused on this, and I really appreciate it. So we're going to go ahead and call it quits for tonight, but I just want to make sure you guys know where to find us. We're on Rumble. We're on YouTube. We are on Arkansas First webpage. I'm about to bring that up here. And Bam. Come and visit us at Arkansas First. We got a ton of articles. We got podcasts from Miss Kandi and us and Mr. Jimmie Cavin on here. They've all written their own articles on here. And we would love to have you guys on here. Click it back. Stop share.
Kevin and Keith, I can't thank you guys enough for
Yeah,
what
we
y'all
thank all
do.
y'all.
And you guys, Kevin and Keith, you guys do a fabulous job with Saline Hardliners and getting this information out. And I'm always humbled to come on your show with you, but I think you guys do a great job.
Well, all you guys write great. Can't write as good as Clint, Jimmie, y'all, and then she works her rear end off podcasting. She gets a little break probably, I guess, since the session's over, but you still got some stuff going on.
No, we are continuing on. Clint and I talked about this. We want to continue the momentum. So Clint and I are still going to do live streams on Wednesdays, and we're going to talk about the things that are going on around the state. We don't want to lose the momentum just because the legislative session is over. We want to continue to bring that information to our listeners. So yeah, we're going to continue the live stream on Wednesdays.
What's the name of your show you have on that podcast on the it's
Arkansas First.
Yeah.
Arkansas First Reports.
Yeah.
What's your other show you do?
The other show that I do is Kandi Unfiltered.
Yeah. And Jimmie has fact or fiction?
Facts not fiction.
Facts not fiction. You do that every once.
Yeah, that's my hashtag is facts not fiction. Yeah. I'm going to continue to do what I do best, and that's piss bad people off.
You got to keep doing it because everybody forgets if you don't watch it. It's like Christmas when it's over, and nobody thinks about it. So it's time to forget. Well, they need to keep thinking about it all during the time because people all the time telling me, "Hey, everything's okay. Trump got elected." No, it's not. No, it's not.
No, it's not.
Okay
it's just the fight's just
begun. But anyway,
I'm going to keep doing what I do best and do what Jennifer tells me.
Hey, that's the best option. That is the best option.
Well, thank you for having me again, guys. It's been fun.
I appreciate
Thank you,
Clint,
guys.
Kandi, Jimmie, Cavin, everybody. And Saline County Hardliners is out.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.